Hello and welcome to Patrick's Models and Transport. So today we're going to have a look at a steam engine, a steam tank engine, and in specific a French steam tank engine. But the model has got a British origin. Oh, very well, here we are. And I think we're going to get a spot of extra light to see what we're doing. Okay, so here we are with a Hornby acHo Meccano, and the motor noise says Hornby, 131 TB 262 tank engine. So potted history on this class. It seems to be a bit dusty. Let's give it a quick clean. I like to clean dust off locomotives. This stuff's been on the layout for some time. I use a brush for a camera lens cleaning brush, because you can blow with a wee bump, you can blow the dust off and give it a good clean. So let's give it a good clean. Okay, quick clean there, and that's that. Very well. So, potted history on this class. Let's go back and get it in view. Seeing as a French flavour, it's right beside the 030T T Boer, right beside it. Okay, right, a spot of extra light to see what we're doing and to get all the details of this model. So, there might have been better with a natural light. Okay, off that, better the normal light. Okay, very well. So, the 131 TB locomotive, this class of locomotives was developed in the 1920s, starting from 1925, for the Société de Chemin de Fer de l'Est, so the Eastern Railway Company in France, both for goods trains and also for suburban trains. Some suburban trains still with double-decker carriages, the very early double-decker carriages. These were particularly powerful locomotives and with a very fast acceleration. We can see that they have a Bell-Paire firebox, and if I don't remember badly, I'm looking at my notes, I think they also had Caprotti valve system as well, at least some of them. But here, of course, we see the quite well executed, albeit simplified, valve gear of the Hornby acHo model. These locomotives then passed under the National French Railways SNCF when they were established in 1937. They continued in service up to 1969, when with the complete dieselization, or nearly complete dieselization of their services, they were then eventually retired. They were both used, as I said before, on goods and suburban trains, and on the whole, they were also quite a part of the class. There were numbers lost during the war, locomotives that were then taken away to Germany. Other locomotives were destroyed by the bombing. We know that France had the French railways took a very heavy toll during the war, both due to transfer of stock around Europe with the German occupation, and also with the bombing and the fighting. And anyway, we can now have a quick look at the model. This is quite a detailed model. Hornby acHo, as the name says, was a British enterprise in France with Meccano, and it was it was a good. They also contributed to pushing Jouef towards model trains, because Jouef initially was looking more at the toy train department. Hornby acHo instead, with experience of Hornby and the mechanics of Hornby and the motors, this is powered by an acHo 4 3-pole motor, as you can no doubt hear by the musical tones. We can see it under here. Let's see if we can have a look at the motor. Maybe we have a spot of light. You might be able to see a little bit of the motor. Inside there we can see the magnet and the winding of the acHo 4. Down here there's the brass worm drive, and in typical Hornby fashion, the central set of wheels, which are the wheels that are driven by the worm drive, don't touch the track. But unlike the Hornby locomotives of this era, they actually have flanges. So that's a nice realistic touch. So Hornby acHo, we're pointing at making efficient models that were also realistic. And in this they took quite a good number of customers from Jouef, but as I said, they also pushed Jouef to improve and to go more towards detailed models, as we can see, for example, by the little 030T Boer tank engine right there behind the 131 TB. So they use these very bulletproof British running units and mechanical and motors, which this motor, the acHo 4, tends to draw current. The magnet is in good condition. These motors are subject to the magnet tends to get demagnetized. They might have to remagnetize the magnets. I've tested this with a screwdriver, and it's okay. It's got a good magnetic the magnet works, and they do tend to draw a bit more current than and that's one of the reasons I switched to the Meccano controllers, because the Lima, and that was a good idea, because Meccano controllers have got a really very good range of speeds, so you can go at from crawling speeds to faster speeds. They're very realistic in the operation. And one of the reasons I did move to the Meccano controller, leaving the old Lima one I had, the slightly better Lima one I had, but we'll talk about controllers in another video, was because you couldn't go, you do one lap of the layout and the temperature switch was switching the controller off, and that was that. Okay, so that's the locomotive. It's got twin headlights at the front. This model here, I bought it second hand, of course. It wasn't, and it was heavily played with. In fact, it had only one buffer. In fact, if we have a look here, the only buffer it had, let's go forward a bit. The only buffer that it still had was this buffer over here. These locomotives had buffers that were painted white. So I rebuilt the other buffers using styrene, modeling styrene, 0.75mm modeling styrene, and small pieces of wire. And I think the result is actually quite good. And considering the model is not in pristine condition, and anyway, these white painted buffers always had traces of grease on them, I dirtied and weathered the buffers to have a realistic look. So that's enough chatting for the moment. Let's try and hitch up to the train. Okay, let's see. These Hornby acHo couplings are sometimes a little temperamental. Let's see if we manage to get a. No way. No, we're going to have to intervene manually. We're going to have to intervene manually. Let's try and do it without causing a disaster, without bashing the lamp as well. The hand of the cameraman is now going to take over control and hitch up with the locomotive. Is that on? Yes, it's on. Perfect. Very well. All very professional around here. Okay, so that's enough chatting for the moment. We will now let the locomotive speak after a short introduction to the train. Okay, so today's train is a goods train, which is fitting in with this locomotive, and specifically, it's a rake of tanker wagons, so it's a fuel train. And the first thing we notice is that we have behind the locomotive, between a locomotive and the first tanker wagon, there's a wagon of gravel, of stones, and that was a typical solution with steam locomotives to put a wagon loaded with ballast between the locomotive and the first tanker loaded with inflammable fuel. That way it was like a sort of fire guard, so any sparks and embers from the locomotive would land not on the tanker wagon but on the open wagon filled with ballast. Model, as we see, is quite realistic, even a coal load. Then we've got a rake of, here's a Lima wagon, which might not really be fitting on this train because by the look of it, it's a gas tanker wagon, but I wanted to include it. We've got, that's a Lima. Then we have another two Lima petrol wagons here. One branded acHo and the other one Shell. These are models that I bought second hand. They're good, quite good. The ladders are a bit thick. Then we have two Jouef acHo wagons. This first one here was not in very good condition, so I decided to weather it. Generally, these wagons are absolutely filthy. The cap on top was missing, so I rebuilt it with styrene in this case here. On the second such wagon that I got was also missing the top cap, but I replaced that with a drawing pin cap, which was an even better solution. Another two axle Shell. Oh, we're going down the sidings. That was a mistake. We weren't supposed to go that way. Okay, let's reverse. I think we're stuck on the points. Things are not going that well on this train. Forgot to move the points. Okay, on we go. And, oh, right, here we are. Two Jouef, two-axle petrol wagons by Shell, and then a Jouef BP wagon. Then, between the last wagon and the brake van, we've got the flatbed truck, simply as a sort of another form of fire barrier between the last tanker full of inflammable liquid and the brake van, which of course would be carrying personnel, the guard, and you don't want to be too close to potential source of fire. The brake van itself is a Jouef brake van with rear illumination, with rear lighting, and I've actually changed the bulb in this one here because it had fused. So that's enough chatting for the moment. Let's just let this train speak in its loud Hornby acHo voice. Bit of wheel slip there because there's a bit of a climb. Fitting in with the original locomotive, with the original full-size locomotive, this locomotive here is quite comfortable at a good over 60%. Oh no, we're getting a derailment. We've got a derailment. Okay, emergency. Of course there has to be a derailment with such a... Okay, something derailed. Let's go again. We're at 55%. Put it at a... This locomotive is a bit temperamental. It tends to slow down on these points. It's what I call a driving locomotive, meaning that you have to keep your... Oh, it's derailed again. We keep having derailing. Why? Let's hope this wagon here hasn't lost its gauging. That happens with Problem is, it's a very light wagon, that one there. I should have put some weight on it. Front lighting is visible, and we can appreciate here the rear lighting on the brake van. This is a locomotive that you have to drive with your hand on a controller, because with only, even if it's got 3 driving wheels, driving axles, only 2 of them touch a track, and so sometimes it tends to wheel slip. There's no, on these, this is a Hornby locomotive, there's no traction tyres, which makes things better fun in my opinion. I quite like the absence of traction tyres. More juice there because there's a wheel slip. Okay, we'll stop here and get an official photograph taken. Let's take the official photograph. And there we go. Okay, on we go again. And there's a point over there, that a set of points that I'm going to have to either give them a very good clean, Meccano points, or I'm going to have to simply put some connectors, solder some cables along to guarantee good continuity here. See that this locomotive here that draws a lot of current tends to slow down. And you do feel the controller getting hotter, huh? Very well, back where we started at the water tower, and okay, so that was our run for today, and let's see if we can get a good view of the, okay, with a bit of light. There we go. That's it. That will be the thumbnail photograph. Right. So to finish off and round off today's chat about the 131 TB SNCF, or Chemin de Fer de l'Est. Pardon my French. I can understand French, I can read French, I don't really speak French, so my French might sound, the pronunciation might be a little funny to French speakers. So going back to Hornby acHo, they had a sort of a brief period of success in France, because when they entered the French market, Jouef was still focusing more on the toy train sector, as I said at the beginning of the video. And they brought in new castings, new locomotives, new mouldings, more realism. But the problem is that Hornby acHo didn't modernize its motors. And Jouef, faced with this competition, did the right thing. It went more towards the models and changed motors. It began using 5-pole motors. It even switched to the very famous belt drive, and began making locomotives that were quieter and more smooth running compared to the Hornby X04, which is a great piece of engineering. Absolutely, I agree. But it's a noisy locomotive. It's really noisy. It's not so controllable. You can crawl. Yes, you can do a crawl, but it sort of bursts into life. It starts accelerating quite quickly. But this is a very interesting inroad of British Hornby onto the European continent in acHo scale. In fact, it's Hornby acHo and not in the double O. So it's a very, very, very interesting what might have been situation if Hornby had also started producing British locomotives in acHo scale. I mean, this is a good locomotive in acHo scale, and we can see that the XO4 can fit an acHo locomotive. And that's a pity that we don't have access to British locomotives. I mean, I'm half British, I'm Scottish, and I like and love British trains, but they're in double O, and I've got acHo stock. I live on a continent, and so I'm an acHo man. That's that. It would have been really interesting if they had sort of also seen how popular and how important British locomotives have been for the history of railways, to also make an acHo range of the most important, most famous, and most appreciated and most loved British locomotives. But this didn't happen because of commercial reasons, and Hornby acHo, Meccano in France, was a very interesting example. I've bought various items of Hornby acHo stock, both wagons and we've seen in the passenger trains some nice carriages, SNCF carriages, and that's a very, very interesting piece of history of model railways, which represents a very interesting, in this case here, and long-serving tank engine. Anyway, that's enough chatting for today. I'll leave you with a final lap of our tanker fuel train, hoping that there will be no disasters. And as the train heads away, oh, a good wheel slip, we need a... As the train heads away, it's cheerio from me, and see you next time. Oh, there we go. I just turned it round up. Okay, cheerio, ciao ciao.